I was camping in the middle of nowhere in Washington near Mount Rainier. Not an official campground, just way out in the forest where I wouldn't have expected another human for miles. One night I wake up and hear something, open my tent, and there's a guy sitting by where my fire had been right outside my tent. Nothing particularly noteworthy about the guy, just a fairly regular-looking dude just sitting there a couple of feet from my tent. No bag or pack or anything with him, just a guy. He saw me open the tent, his eyes got huge like he had just seen a ghost, and he took off. It shook me up pretty badly, but over the next day I managed to put it out of my mind fairly well, after writing it off as just some odd occurrence and a guy who was probably high or something, and had somehow managed to set up a camp coincidentally not far from mine. Then 2 days after that, and 10, 15 miles away in totally random directions, that nobody could take the same path as on accident. I was sitting by the fire that night and started hearing noises that I got more and more convinced were a person. I called out to them, and out of the darkness, someone was like, "Do you know how to get to Bell's Canyon?" I said, "No, I don't even think that's a real place there." They kept talking from just out of my line of vision. I tried to see them with my flashlight, but they yelled, "Aim that away," and kind of spooked and not wanting to piss off a potentially crazy person, I did. After like 15 minutes of me being very freaked out and them talking and asking completely random questions from the darkness, it sounded like the voice had gotten closer. So I shined my light that way again, and it was the same dude who had been outside my tent 2 nights before. He had to have followed me almost 15 miles over 2 days, because there was no way he could have just accidentally wound up in the SAME spot as vast as that wilderness is. No possible way. As soon as my light hit him, he took off again. I started to chase him but didn't want to get lost in the wilderness in the dark, so stopped quickly after probably only 100, 200 feet. This one couldn't be written off because the only way he could have been in both places is specifically if he was following me. I decided the trip was very over first thing in the morning and hiked back out over 3 days. I was constantly doubling back, trying to throw anyone following off my trail. I really can't describe how terrifying it was to feel like I was being hunted through the woods and to actually have to brainstorm on things I could do to avoid potentially being murdered. On the first night of hiking out, twice I heard what sounded like a person walking circles outside my tent. But by the time I mustered the courage to look, nobody was there. On the second night, I heard what I thought was an animal making noises at first in the distance, but slowly decided sounded more like a human making animal calls, but could have actually been an animal, but I didn't actually see the guy again. But it really sounded like a person making howling noises. I literally almost cried when I finally got back to my car. The relief was so strong. To this day, probably the most terrifying experience I've ever had. I have no idea who the guy was or what his intentions were and no way of getting an explanation, but I really can't articulate just what a terrifying few days it was. It was a warm summer day over the weekend, and my brother, my sister, and I decided to go to the park with our 2 best friends. The park was close to where we lived, and it was in an isolated area surrounded by woods. Parents would sit on the picnic tables not too far from the playground while they watched their kids play. We met our friends there and we played on the playground, and then we played tag with some of the other kids. While everyone else was on the playground, my friend and I wanted to go explore in the woods. We didn't ask our parents first because we thought it would be okay. We started hiking and we discovered a stream. My friend and I loved science and rocks and minerals, so we started searching for cool rocks. We continued exploring until we thought we heard something or someone walking in the woods because the leaves were crunching. We thought it was an animal, so we looked around, but didn't see anything or anyone, so we continued exploring. As we made it farther into the woods, I got an uncomfortable feeling that someone was watching us, so I asked if we could go back to the playground. My friend said sure because our parents would worry if they didn't see us. We hiked back and continued playing on the playground. As we were swinging on the swings, we saw a little boy wander off in the woods to explore. We noticed a car parked on the other side of the woods, and a guy came out from behind a tree and closer to the little boy. It looked like the guy was trying to lure the boy to come with him. The boy started to go with him, and the guy tried to grab him, but just then his parents noticed and called for him to come back. The guy that wanted to kidnap him took off running into the woods and drove away quickly. One of the parents got a picture of the kidnapper, though. My friend and I were freaked out because we were in the same spot as the guy. He could have been hiding behind a tree watching us the whole time, or took off with one of us running. Thank goodness we are both okay, and one of the parents noticed and saved the boy from getting kidnapped. After that, my family and friends all went home. We decided never to go back to that park ever again. It was the summer of 2015, and I had just moved to a quiet, peaceful town. The community was nestled in the heart of nature, surrounded by dense forests and a park where families gathered to enjoy picnics and children played on sunny afternoons. This park, however, would soon become the center of something far more sinister. One sunny afternoon, I decided to take a leisurely stroll through the park, my dog Bella wagging her tail by my side. Families were scattered across the green expanse, and the laughter of children echoed through the air. It all seemed so idyllic, but the tranquility would soon be shattered. As I walked along the winding path, I noticed something peculiar. Tacked to a tree was a missing person poster featuring a young girl with delicate features, her eyes staring out with innocence. The text beneath the photo read, "Last seen near the park." It sent a shiver down my spine, but I quickly brushed it off as a mere coincidence. The sun was beginning to set, and I decided to head back home. Little did I know that this was just the beginning of a series of chilling events that would forever haunt my memory. A few weeks later, the town's atmosphere was charged with tension. Another young girl had gone missing, and her image joined the first on a growing number of missing person posters around the park. Fear had settled like a dark cloud over our once serene community. One evening, as Bella and I took our usual route through the park, I noticed an unusual man sitting on a bench. He had a cold, distant look in his eyes, and he watched the children playing with an eerie intensity. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was horribly wrong. As weeks turned into months, the park became increasingly desolate. Parents kept their children inside, and our walks through the park became far less frequent. The missing person posters multiplied, haunting reminders of the children who had vanished without a trace. The police were stumped, and a sense of dread had enveloped our town. One fateful evening, as I walked through the park, I saw him again, the man from the bench, only this time he was not alone. He was with a young girl, no older than 10, who had an unmistakable look of terror in her eyes. My heart raced as I approached them, intent on rescuing her. But as I drew nearer, the man's chilling smile sent shivers down my spine. He whispered something to the girl, and before I could react, he plunged a knife into her side. Horror washed over me as I watched her fall lifeless to the ground. Panic overtook me as I fled, searching for help, but it seemed that no one was nearby. The authorities were alerted, and a massive manhunt ensued. They eventually caught the man, and our town could finally breathe a collective sigh of relief. But the park was forever marred by the horrors that unfolded there. Families returned, but with a sense of caution, forever haunted by the knowledge that true evil could lurk even in the most idyllic places.